Ancient Tales of the Dwemer, Part 10, The Dowry, by Marobar Sul. Book 10 of a series of fictional stories about the Dwemer. Hinale was the wealthiest landowner in Gunal, and he had over the years saved a tremendous dowry for the man who would marry his daughter, Yennefer. When she reached the age of consent, he locked the gold away for safekeeping, and announced his intention to have her marry. She was a comely lass, a scholar, a great athlete, but dour and brooding in aspect. This personality defect did not bother her potential suitors any more than her positive traits impressed them. Every man knew the tremendous wealth that would be his as the husband of Yennefer and son-in-law of Hinale. That alone was enough for hundreds to come to Gunal to pay court. "The man who will marry my daughter," said Hinale to the assembled, "must not be doing so purely out of avarice. He must demonstrate his own wealth to my satisfaction." This simple pronouncement removed a vast majority of the suitors, who knew they could not impress the landowner with their meagre fortunes. A few dozen did come forward within a few days, clad in fine Kilark cloth of spun silver, accompanied by exotic servants, travelling in magnificent carriages. Of all who came who met with Hinale's approval, none arrived in a more resplendent fashion than Welin Nerillik. The young man whom no one had ever heard of arrived in a shining ebon coach drawn by a team of dragons, his clothing of rarest manufacture, and accompanied by an army of the most fantastical servants any of Gunal had ever seen. Valets with eyes on all sides of their heads, maid-servants that seemed cast in gemstones. But such was not enough with Hinale. "The man who marries my daughter must prove himself an intelligent fellow, for I would not have an ignoramus as a son-in-law and business partner," he declared. This eliminated a large part of the wealthy suitors who, through their lives of luxury, had never needed to think very much of it at all. Still, some came forward over the next few days, demonstrating their wit and learning, quoting the great sages of the past, and offering their philosophies of metaphysics and alchemy. Welin Nerillik too came, and asked Hinale to dine at the villa he had rented outside of Gunal. There the landowner saw scores of scribes working on translations of Aldmeri tracts, and enjoyed the young man's somewhat irreverent but intriguing intelligence. Nevertheless, though he was much impressed with Welin Nerillik, Hinale had another challenge. "I love my daughter very much," said Hinale, "and I hope the man who marries her will make her as happy as well. Should any of you make her smile, she and the great dowry are yours." The suitors lined up for days, singing her songs, proclaiming their devotion, describing her beauty in the most poetic of terms. Yennefer merely glared at all with hatred and melancholia. Hinale, who stood by her side, began to despair at last. His daughter's suitors were failing to a man at this task. Finally Welin Nerillik came to the chamber. "I will make your daughter smile," he said. "I dare say I'll make her laugh, but only after you've agreed to marry us. If she is not delighted within 1 hour of our engagement, the wedding can be called off." Hinale turned to his daughter. She was not smiling, but her eyes had sparkled with some morbid curiosity in this young man. As no other suitor had even registered that for her, he agreed. "The dowry is naturally not to be paid till after you've wed," said Hinale. "Being engaged is not enough." Might I see the dowry still? Asked Willin. Knowing how fabled the treasure was, and understanding that this would likely be the closest the young man would come to possessing it, Inale agreed. He had grown quite fond of Welin. On his orders, Welin, Inale, Glum, Yennefer, and the castellan delved deep into the stronghold of Gunal. The first vault had to be opened by touching a series of runic symbols. Should one of the marks be mispressed, a volley of poisoned arrows would have struck the thief. Hinale was particularly proud of the next level of security. A lock composed of blades with 18 tumblers required 3 keys to be turned simultaneously to allow entry. The blades were designed to eviscerate any who merely picked one of the locks. Finally, they reached the storeroom. It was entirely empty. By Lorcan, we've been burgled! Who could have done this? A humble, but, if I may say so, rather talented burglar, said Willin. A man who has loved your daughter from afar for many years, but did not possess the glamour or the learning to impress. That is, until the gold from her dowry afforded me the opportunity. You? Bellowed Hinale, scarcely able to believe it. Then something even more unbelievable happened. Yennefer began to laugh. She had never even dreamed of meeting anyone like this thief. She threw herself into his arms before her father's outraged eyes. After a moment, Hinale too began to laugh. Yennefer and Willin were married in a month's time. Though he was in fact quite poor and had little scholarship, Hinale was amazed how much his wealth increased with such a son-in-law and business partner. He only made certain never to ask from whence came the excess gold. Publisher's note: the tale of a man trying to win the hand of a maiden whose father, usually a wealthy man or a king, tests each suitor is quite common. See, for instance, the more recent Four Suitors of Benita by Joel Jolives. The behavior of the characters is quite out of character for the Dwemer. No one today knows their marriage customs, or even if they had marriage at all. One rather odd theory of the disappearance of the dwarfs came from this and a few other tales of Marobar Sul. It was proposed that the Dwemer never, in fact, left. They did not depart Nirn, much less the continent of Tamriel, and they are still among us, disguised. These scholars use the story of Azura and the box to suggest that the Dwemer feared Azura, a being they could neither understand nor control, and they adapted the dress and manner of Kimmer and Altmer in order to hide from Azura's gaze.